Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Piyush. This is day 44 in 40 days of Kubernetes series. Yes, I know the name is 40 days of Kubernetes, but how come we are on day 44? So if you are someone who has been following my channel or my playlist for a while, you probably already know the context, right? So earlier we had this complete playlist of CKA, Certified Kubernetes Administrator course. But then on 18th February 2025 this year, Linux Foundation introduced some new topics. They have made some recent advancement in the course curriculum. So that is why I've decided to cover all those topics as well, all the newly added topics, all the modified topics as well in the same series. So that is why we are adding more to 40 days of Kubernetes, right? So this is day 44 and in this video we'll be covering Kustomize, which is a Kubernetes deployment tool similar to Helm, but it has more features. It supports it's a different kind of tool. So we'll be covering a lot from the demo perspective, from the concept perspective. We'll see the differences, like when to use Kustomize or not. So without wasting any time, let's start with the video. All right, so I'm just gonna first explain you the agenda, what we'll be covering in this video. So we'll start with the concept, what is Kustomize, why do we use it, and so on. And then we'll see getting started means how to quickly get started with Kustomize, like what are the prerequisites of it, do we need an installation or not, and some nitty gritty of it. Then we'll see the demo of creating a simple customization, right? The basic fundamental customization in a single environment. Okay. Then we see how do we manage multiple environments using Kustomize, because the true power of Kustomize lies in managing multiple environments at once using the same files. So this is what we're gonna discuss from the concept perspective, and then we'll be doing the demo of the same. We'll cover overlays, patches, config map generator, and so on. So these are all the essential concept of Kustomize. And as I've told in the beginning, this video might go a little longer than I expected. So make sure you watch till the end. Okay, so let's start with the first one. What exactly is Kustomize? Okay, so we have already seen Helm, right? Helm is what? A package manager for Kubernetes. We have seen that in previous video in depth. If you have not watched the video, I would highly recommend having a look at it. What it does, it actually bundles all the manifests together, all the Kubernetes manifests, deployment YAML, service YAML, config map, secrets, all the YAMLs that you have for an application, it bundles them together, and collectively it is known as a Helm chart or a chart. But this is based on templates, right? So it uses the concept of templating. It creates a template, and from the templates the manifest will be generated and so on, right? So that's what the Kustomize is in a nutshell. And then you can create releases out of it. You can use the same help chart to deploy in multiple environments. You can transfer it in multiple clusters and so on. But then managing different environments was difficult with Helm, right? So you can install same Helm chart in different environments, but then you have to customize the chart based on each environment specification. Like, what if we need different labels for each environment? What if we need different annotations, different secrets, config maps? So it becomes a tedious task to manage all of those in Helm. And Helm needs a steep learning curve, like to create the template. To create a simple template is fine, but when it comes to a production grade application, it becomes complex to understand the template. I think it uses a Go templating syntax, so it becomes an overwhelming experience for a beginner. So this is when Kustomize come into the picture. It's a similar Kubernetes deployment tool. It does not bundle the package together, rather it has a folder structure, and based on that you do the deployment. Plus it supports multiple environments, right? So you create a base configuration which has all the common files, and then you create certain separate files for each of the environments which only has the changes, right? For example, let's say you want some labels that has to be applied across all the environments, right? So you put that label in the base file of Kubernetes deployment, right? And then you have some labels which are environment specific. So you create these labels in this multiple environment specific directories. I will explain everything, don't worry about it. But for now, I'm just trying to give you a context of difference between Helm and Kustomize, right? And it does not use templates. Kustomize does not use templates, so that's the main difference between Helm and Kustomize also. Now, instead of templates and variables, it uses a layered approach on existing YAML, right? It creates a folder structure, it creates a hierarchy, and it actually uses the existing YAML, but on the existing YAML, you create a child YAML for each of the environment and override your changes in that. Now, for example, so this is just an example. Let's say you have your application which has multiple manifests, right? So you have deployment YAML, you have service YAML, you have config map YAML, secret YAML, whatever, right? So you have multiple YAML. If it would have been an Helm chart, you would just have packaged it and you have deployed that chart in multiple environments. But before deploying the chart, you had to make some changes which are environment specific. But now that we are using Helm, in the same directory, in the same base directory or the application folder directory where all your YAML files are, you create a new file called customization.yaml. Okay, it has to be with the same name, it has to be with the same format and extension. What it will have like this file. In this file, you will declare all those resources first. Okay, so in customization, you say, so I have these three resources: deployment YAML, service YAML, config YAML. So that's one thing, you declare the resources, and also you do the customization of resources. Like, what are all the resources that are environment specific? Okay, I will show you the demo, I will explain you everything, don't worry about it. I'm just giving you a brief overview, right? But we'll do that in detail. So if you are lost till now, don't worry, you'll get it in few minutes, I promise. Okay, so you create a file customization YAML, in that you declare all your resources. Okay, and then you also do customization of your resources. For example, add a common label. We are not talking about multiple environments yet, we are just getting started with a simple configuration, single environment. Okay, so let's say there is some label that you have to apply in each of the resources, right? So you put that common label in the customization.yaml and it will be applied to all the resources. Now, to run the customization, there are multiple options. First is, if you have downloaded Kustomize from the binary or from the package itself, then you can run customize build and then the folder or the location of the folder, and it will generate your manifest YAMLs. And if you just want to apply, then you just pipe the result from it to kubectl apply -f-. That's it. Okay, so I think I have covered enough concept about the basic structure of Kustomize and how do we run it. Let's do that in the demo so that you can do the hands-on, you'll get the idea and you understand it in a better way. Okay, so I'm just gonna move to demo now. So I found this free lab by KodeKloud. If you want, you can use that to practice, to do the hands-on if you don't have a Kubernetes cluster ready, up and running. If you have a cluster, then you can use that. It doesn't matter. Like, we are just using a platform to do the hands-on. So I had this one. So I thought of, why don't we use it? Okay. So we'll start with the basic to understand the directory structure, right? So let's follow this tutorial and then we'll add additional things on top of it. Okay, let's say it's explore the directories and files within root code k8s folder. Okay, so here is our VS Code that is built inside the sandbox environment. Okay, so it has a folder called code, and inside that we have a k8s folder. Inside k8 folder we have three different folders. Let's assume that this is a 3-tier application, so each of the application tier has its own folder. So we have DB tier, Nginx, which could be front end, message broker, that could be your backend, RabbitMQ, and then we have a database tier. So each of these has three files, three YAML files. Okay, so let's explore this. So for example, front end Nginx deployment YAML. So this is a simple deployment file that we have seen for Nginx, right? Deployment with 3 replicas. It has labels Nginx and it is using a container with the image as Nginx. Okay, so nothing different about it. Similarly, Nginx service, it has a node port service which is exposing on target port 80. Similarly, we have RabbitMQ service on target port 5672, RabbitMQ deployment with one replicas, and like this is how a usual deployment is. So this is now considering we are not using customize. This is how we do the deployment of any Kubernetes manifest, right? We create separate deployment files, service YAML file, everything we create it separate and apply changes one by one. Okay, so let's follow along. How many directories have been predefined in the K's directory? It has three directories, so let's use this. Okay, let's create a single customization YAML file in the root of K's directory and import all the resources defined for DB, message broker, and Nginx. And please ensure to apply the config after creating customization YAML. Okay, so this is like what I was talking about before. Without customization, you can just go inside this folder and apply each file one by one, or apply all the files, or whenever you have to make the change, you actually move that entire folder, or you check in into some git repository and clone that repo somewhere, and then execute all those YAML files with kubectl apply. But now that we are using customize, there is a simpler way of doing it. What we can do is, in the root directory of k8s, this folder, so let's create a file and let's call it customization.yaml. Okay, in this directory we import all these resources. Okay, how do we do that? If you want, you can check the solution. Okay, because this is something that we are doing for the first time. You want to check the solution, you can do that, or you want to follow along, you can do that as well. So the way of doing it is, you add your resources over here. So it starts with resources colon, and then it will be a list of elements, all the elements, right? So we'll start with, let's say, db. So db slash db config.yaml. Okay, and then db slash db deploy.yaml. Make sure to use the right naming convention, like whatever is there. db slash db service.yaml. And then similarly we have message broker slash rabbitmq config.yaml. In fact, let me do this thing. So I'm inside the code folder. Let's run find. This will be easier, right? I'll just copy paste from here, or I'll just go inside the k's folder and then run find again. Okay, so we were RabbitMQ config is done. Now RabbitMQ deployment, and then we have RabbitMQ service, and let's do the same for Nginx. So Nginx has two files, and then Nginx service. All right, so all the files we have placed over here inside the resources block in a YAML format. Okay, now we have to apply those changes. So what we can do is, let me just save this file, and to apply the changes you can use kubectl customize. I think that's how it is, and dot. So customize, like Helm chart, you had to install explicitly from a package manager, right? You do apt-get install Helm, or you install from the binary, or there are different options we saw, right? But this customize is built in within kubectl, so you don't have to explicitly install it, right? So this is how you use it. I believe that is the syntax. So kubectl customize dot. Okay, I believe we are not in the right directory, so let's go a directory back. So it will take the directory where your customization.yaml exists, right? So it's there in the code folder. Let me see where it is. It's there in the k8s folder. So I think I'm using maybe there is a mistake over here. Okay, so there is a typo over here. Maybe that's why it was just throwing the error. I did not read the entire error. So it was just saying no such file or directory, or not a valid directory. So let's go directory back and let's run the customize command again. Okay, now this customize command, what it will do, it will just print all your deployment manifests, right? So these are all the deployment manifests separated by these three hyphens, and it has everything, right? It has your config map, it has your um, service deployment for all those components, right? It did not apply the changes yet. To apply the changes, what you can do it, you can either redirect it to a file manifest.yaml or whatever, and you apply the changes, or you run the same command, pipe it kubectl apply hyphen f and then hyphen. I think that should be it. Okay, so it says everything is created, so all the changes has been applied. So if I do kubectl get all, okay, you will see we have deployment for db deployment, nginx, rabbitmq, all three are there. It's still coming up, but yeah, so nginx is up now, and if we wait for a few more seconds, so rabbitmq is now up. It's just waiting for the db to come up, and the db is also up. So kubectl get pods, if I do that, so we have the deployments are running. It's just db pod is coming up, container creating state, and I'm sure it will come up. So that's what we wanted to do, and I think that's it for this. Now let's hit next. Okay, how many pods are deployed in the default namespace? So 1 2 3 4 5, and then that's what is the type of service that has been deployed for message broker. So for that, let's run kubectl get service for message broker, which is rabbit, and the service type is cluster ip. So let's use that, and let's create a customization.yaml file in each of the subdirectories and import only the resources within that directory. Okay, so it's an additional step. Let's try this. What it is saying is you create customization.yaml in each of these directories so that you can do your environment specific customizations and overriding over there, right? So for that, let's go inside this directory. Let's run customization.yaml. And now how would you import your resources over here? You actually create like the way we have imported resources in the root directory. We'll do the same, but this time for that specific directory only. So resources, and the resources, let's say this file is inside the db. So I'm just gonna do find and inside db, so db deployment, actually these three. Okay, I'll just copy it first, then make the changes. So db deployment, db service, and then db config. So that's for db, and then inside message broker, create the same file customization.yaml, and inside that message broker, I'll just copy it from here, resources, and let me delete the folder because we are inside that folder only. Okay, and then another file inside nginx, customization.yaml, and oops, not here, resources, nginx deployment, and nginx service. Okay, now what we had earlier, it was customization.yaml in the root directory. Now we split that in multiple directories because we want only those changes to be applied, and we can make the customization as per the folder, right? So now the customization.yaml at the root directory, we don't need those files, we only need the folder, right? So let's remove these, and let's just only keep the folders. Okay, so now we are just importing resources of these three folders so that we can add, like later on when we do the additional demo after this, we'll add all the customization over here in the root directory, right? Like common labels, config map generator, and so on. But for now, that's what we want to do. Okay, so we created one file with just the folder names in the root directory, and inside every directory we created customization.yaml to import the resources of that directory. Okay, and now we can apply the changes. I think that's what it is asking. Yeah, so let's apply the changes. So inside kits folder, yeah, okay, so we'll run the same command, and what it will do, it will execute the root customization.yaml, which is this one, and it will and this in turn will execute the files inside db, inside message broker, inside nginx. It will locate customization.yaml inside those folders and it will execute those as well. So that's what we are doing. Okay, it says it's created. I think it was already created, so it might not have done anything because it was, oh no, it recreated everything. Okay, that's good. uh so yeah, that's it. This one is also completed. Now let's see if we have any more task in this. How many pods are in total? You can simply check. There are six. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Yeah, so you can select this, but if I select this, the lab will end. I don't want to do that. I want to take this one step further, and I want to add the support for multiple environments, right? So what I will do is, okay, let me end this lab and I'll restart this again. Okay, so let's mark this complete, or just stop the lab. Let's mark this complete and let's submit the feedback. Okay, something is not right. Okay, let's hit continue. And where was the lab? Let's rerun the lab again. By the way, I'll share the link of this lab in the description of this video. It's free to use, you can use that. Let's restart the lab. Okay, but before that, before we proceed with the lab, let's first understand the concept of multiple environment, how it works. Okay, it did not stop it, so let's stop it from here. And continue. I think this should have ended it now. Okay, let's restart it again. Okay, now it's provisioning it again. So changes that we did so far, that might have been lost. So don't worry, we'll be doing a new demo. So let's keep the way it is. Okay, and before that, let's understand what exactly is multiple environments. Like, how do we work with multiple environments in Kustomize? Okay, so earlier, what we saw is we created everything inside where is the folder structure. Okay, so this is what we did, right? We created everything inside the home directory or the application folder. We created deployment, service, config map, all the manifest files along with the customization.yaml. Okay, that's what we did. Now what we will be doing is we will divide this configuration over here into multiple environments. So rename this folder to base. Okay, so this is your base, deployment, service YAML, customization YAML, right? And then at the same level of base, we create another folder called overlays. Okay, make sure you use the same names. Okay, so we create another name called overlays, another folder with the name overlays, and inside that we create subdirectories of each of the environments: dev, test, staging, production, whatever. And inside those we create our customization YAML and only the changes that we need. For example, we want the base deployment YAML to be used for dev environment and stage environment. That's fine. Let's say this is an nginx file for a simple web application, and we want For dev environments, 2 replicas should be created. For stage environment, 3 replicas should be created, right? So we define the container name, the image name, everything inside this base deployment YAML, right? And the environment specific configuration, for example, the replicas, those changes we will be doing this in this file over here, replicas.yaml over here and replicas.yaml over here in the different folders as well, right? So that's what we'll be doing now. To continue this further, to understand this in a better way, so we have a base folder which will have all your common configurations, the one that needs to be applied in all the environments, right? And then in the overlays folder over here, you will have your environment specific configuration, your dev, test, prod, stage, whatever, and you make the changes to only the environment that is needed. You don't have to make the changes in the base environment or in all the environments. So you make the changes as per the environment specification. In the base folder, you provide your common tags, common labels, common environment variable, resources, like how did we do the mapping earlier, similarly resources, and then all the base configuration you added over here. Now in overlays, you provide environment specific configuration, for example environment name, request limits, labels, replicas for each of the environment, right? Now this is a sample customization.yaml when working with multiple environments. So this is for the base folder. Okay, so it has a resource mapping with the different files, manifest YAMLs, deployment service, config map. Then we have common labels. So this is in camel casing. If you have noticed, it starts with a small case letter, and then when there is a different word, it has the uppercase letter. So camel casing, right? And the common labels is, let's say, app, my app. This will be applied to all the resources. Then we have common annotations, let's say version, and this again will be applied to all the resources. Then you have your name prefix, that means the resource name will start with custom hyphen, that's the prefix, and the name suffix is hyphen v1.0, that means the name will ended with hyphen v1.0 because this is a suffix. Now all these changes will be applied to all the resources because this is in the base folder. This is the common configuration for your environments, right? And yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to show for the environment, but let's do the demo and let's understand this in a better way. All right. Okay, so we were here. I have a assignment for this, so you can follow along or you can just watch it now and then you can implement it later on by your own. So what I will do is, inside the code folder, I will create another folder, or I'll just go inside the code folder and apply some changes over here, right? So what we can do is we'll start with creating 3 directories, actually 4 directories, one base, one overlays, and inside overlays we create for test and dev. Okay, so inside code, let's create a folder and let's call it customize hyphen nginx. Okay, so we'll put everything inside here inside this folder, customize nginx. Now inside this we create 2 folders, one is base, okay, and another folder, and let's call it overlays. Okay, now this is something, this will look something like this: customize nginx, base, and overlays. Now inside overlays we create 2 folders for dev and test, dev, and another folder called test. Okay, so this is our folder structure. The folder structure has been completed. Now I'll just add a deployment.yaml in the root directory, like in the base folder, because base is the root where all your changes, all your common changes will be there. So this is the root directory. So inside base I'll create a file called deployment.yaml. Okay, I have the content of it. Let me just close this file. Okay, I'll provide everything in the GitHub repository, so don't worry about it. So this is a simple deployment YAML file. You see, a deployment of Nginx deployment with one replicas using Nginx 1.21, exposing container on port 80, and then it also has resource request and limits, and it is using a volume mount on this particular directory, and then it also has a config map which is mounted as a volume. Okay, so deployment.yaml. So that's first change. The next change that I will do is I will create a service YAML as well in the same base folder. Service.yaml. Now this service.yaml, what it is doing, the Nginx service that we created, Nginx deployment that we created, we are exposing that deployment as a cluster IP service on port 80. Okay, so let's save this file as well. Now we create the customization.yaml. So customization.yaml inside the base folder. Let's create the customization.yaml. And inside that we'll start with resources. Now what all resources are there in the base directory? So we have deployment.yaml, and then we have service.yaml. Okay, so this is what we have created. Now add few more details. So we are also using a config map, but we want that config map to be generated for each environment, right? So what we'll do is we'll create a file index.html over here in each of the directory, and then we'll generate that config map based on that file. So I'll use config map generator field over here, and inside that let's give it a name, nginx-config, and the data inside this is, let's use files index.html. Okay, this is our default web page that we'll be using to serve the application. Now we want the content of this file to be created, right? So inside the same base directory we create index.html. If you keep following this, if you keep doing this, you will totally understand like what we are doing and why we are doing each of the step. Once we test the changes, once we apply the changes, everything will be clear. So index.html, it will just print the heading, welcome to base nginx application. Okay, so let's save this. Now based on this file it will generate a config map. Okay, so we'll test those things as well, but for now, okay, let's just test this first. So inside let's go inside base. Okay, inside customize YAML, and then inside base let's run kubectl customize dot. Okay, so this is the file it generated. So this is a deployment YAML, and inside that we have a config map. You see the config map name has been changed. So this is because it generated with the help of a file. Now it might have created another manifest for config map. So you see this is service YAML and this is the config map YAML. So you see we did not created the config map, it generated based on the file we provided, right? So if you scroll up, you see this is API version v1, this is data, and kind is config map. Data is the index.html content. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show. Now we created that for the base directory. If we apply these changes, it will be applicable to just single environment where we don't have multiple environment configuration. Now we have to perform the same steps. I mean, similar steps, not exactly the same, because it will be we have to override the configuration of environment. We'll do that for all of these environment for dev and test. Okay, so let's go inside dev and let's first create the customization.yaml. Customization.yaml. Now we'll add the things that we discussed earlier. So first let's start with name prefix. Okay, name prefix is dev. We want the name to start with dev. Then namespace is equal to dev. Let's use this namespace. Then we have resources. Now resources will be what resources we have to provide. We have to provide the path of the base folder over here, right? So it should be two directories back, because we are in two directories. We are inside dev, which is part of overlays, so we have to go two directories back inside the base folder. Okay, so that's why resources two directories back inside the base folder. And then we also have to provide config map generator, and name was nginx config. And behavior, we have to provide behavior. What are we doing with that config, right? So we have to provide the behavior, replace, and files as index.html, right? And now we also have to provide patch. I will explain it to you what exactly is a patch. Patch is the environment specific configuration that we are doing. So in fact, let me just create that file first. So let's create a file and let's call it replicas.yaml. Okay, now we created a deployment.yaml over here, right? So let's copy the entire file and let's go inside replicas, paste it over here, and remove everything except replicas. So I'm gonna remove volume, volume mount, request limit, image, containers. Okay, does it have replicas over here somewhere? It did not have, right? So inside spec, I will just add replicas. Let's give replicas equal to 1. Okay, and oh, replicas was over here. It should, okay, so my bad, sorry. So what I will do is I will remove everything from here and here, right? So yeah, remove everything in the spec except replicas. So that's our replicas.yaml. Now what we did, we have a bigger file which is deployment.yaml, which has the common information, which has the common details. And then we have replicas.yaml inside dev, which only has the environment specific details. I want dev environment to have one replicas and I want test environment to have different number of replicas. So this is how we do that. We do that with the help of patches. Now this is replicas.yaml, but it becomes a patch for customization. So now over here, what we do is we provide this like this path and then replicas.yaml. Okay. So similarly, we have to make the changes for resource request. How we do that? Let me just create another file inside dev, and let's call it limits.yaml. Okay. So now what we did, we remove everything inside the spec except the resource request and limits. Yes, you can leave the container name because this has to be part of container, right? Replicas was not part of container. Replicas was part of spec. It was inside the spec, so that's why we had to remove everything. But you can keep the container name, and rest everything you can delete, including the replicas. So that's limit. Now inside customization.yaml, you just provide the path to the limits. So limits.yaml. Okay. Now let's make the changes. We are inside base, so let's go back. So we have customization, limits, replicas. Let me check. Okay, we have to create one more file, index.yaml. Inside the dev, index.yaml. So this file will say this is the development configuration or development environment. Okay. So we have created now these 4 files. Now let's test the changes. So same thing, kubectl customize dot unable to find customization dot yaml. Why? Because we are not in the right directory. We have to go inside overlays dev. Okay, or we can just provide the path in the customization command. Instead of dot, we can just provide the path. So now if we do that, what does it say? Index.html, no such file or directory. Index.yaml. Okay, I've made a mistake over here. So index.html. How did it find and how did it do the validation? So you see, we specified everything inside customization.yaml. We have imported this file, so that means this file has to exist. The same way these two files has to exist in the same folder where we have specified. Okay, so now let's apply the command again, and you see over here, this is the deployment config that it created. Deployment manifest that it created. This is config map, and here it says deployment environment. It does not say base environment, it says deployment environment, which is part of this folder. And then we have this, the same config map. We have service. You see it has added dev hyphen in front of service because we used, if you check customization.yaml, we used name prefix as dev hyphen. Okay, you can use name suffix as well, it will add the string at the end. And similarly it did that for service. It might have done the same for deployment. You see dev hyphen nginx deployment, and namespace is dev. Now this dev namespace might not exist, so let's create a dev namespace. Kubectl apply hyphen, oops, sorry, no, not like that. Kubectl create ns and name is dev. Okay, now apply the changes. Customization kubectl apply hyphen f hyphen. Okay, it created service deployment and everything. So kubectl get pods hyphen n equal to dev. Okay, this is running. Now let's see the service as well. Okay, service is also running, but this is a cluster IP, so we cannot use that from outside the server, but we can curl on this service. Okay, so let's do a curl on this service, and it is returning the development environment. Okay, it is returning the development environment instead of the base environment. Now let's do the same for another environment, which is test. So what I can do is I can just copy the content from here and we'll make the changes in that. So inside the test folder, I just copy customization from here. Inside test folder, let's create a new file, customization.yaml. Okay, so let's make the changes. Test namespace is test. This is fine. nginx config replace with this. Replicas limits. Okay, this is also fine. Now replicas, let's use more replicas over here inside test. Replicas.yaml. Let's use 3 replicas, and let's create another file for limits. Limits.yaml, and this time I've used a different limits, different memory request and limits. Okay, and then create another file called index.html, and this time I use a different heading which says this is a test environment. Okay, let's make another change. Let's make change to the service. Instead of cluster IP, let's use node port so that we can see the service running on the browser, right? So let's make the change over here. It should be node port, and over here as well, node port. Let's use 30,000. Okay, hit save. By now, because we are on video 44th, I'm sure you would have already be aware of services, node port, why do we use it, and so on. Like, if you are not, if you are new to it, I would highly recommend watching those videos first. Okay, it's in the same playlist. So I've made the changes over here so that the test configuration will be exposed on port 30,000 on a web browser. Okay, so let's just have a look at all the details. Nginx config, test, limits, replicas. Okay, should be good. Now instead of dev, I'll just go to test folder, and I might have to create a new namespace. So kubectl create ns test. Okay, and let's apply the changes now. Okay, all right, so kubectl get svc hyphen n equal to test. Now this is a node port service exposed on port 30,000. Because this is inside a sandbox, what you can do is you can either do a port forwarding to view that in the web browser, or you can do the port forwarding from here as well. I believe over here, view port and 38.4. Okay, 30,000, open port, and here it is. It says this is a test environment. Now what you have seen over here is we have used, okay, let's forget everything else for now. Just focus on this folder structure. Okay, so what we have used, this is our application directory, customization ns. Inside that we created two directories, base and overlays. Base will have the common configuration, you know, your entire deployment.yaml, your customization.yaml, service yaml, index.yaml. Inside this customization YAML, we created the resources, like what all resources will be part of it. Then we did a config map generator. Similarly, you can do a secret generator as well. Okay. Then because we have to apply the changes into multiple environments, we created another folder called overlays, and inside overlays, we created two folders, one for each environment. Now inside those two folders, we created customization.yaml. In that we added few fields such as name prefix, namespace. This is like we want our dev resources to be created in a dev namespace, right? So that's why we created that. And then we import the resources to import the common resources, right? And because service is not part of any of the environment, right? We did not make any changes to the service. We could have made it like we could have created node port service for each of this environment and expose on the same port, because those are of different namespace. We can do that, but for now we did not do that. We imported all the resources from the base. Now in the base we have a deployment.yaml and service.yaml. It applied service.yaml because we did not make any customization on service.yaml, right? But it did not apply deployment.yaml from here. It applied deployment.yaml whatever we changed from here. So this deployment.yaml, it had one replicas, and over here in this dev customization replicas, we had one replica. So you might not see the changes, but if you update this to 2, you might understand the difference, right? That it will apply only the dev changes, not the base changes for the customization. So base plus the customization is what we did. Now similarly for test environment, in the customization we created test base, replace this file, and then replicas limit. In this replicas we had 3 replicas. So for test we had 3 replicas. Now if we do kubectl get pods, you see we have 3 replicas. So it took the deployment.yaml from base, but it had one replicas, but we use patch for that replica. So that's why it override the configuration from the environment itself, right? Similarly from the limits, you can check the limits. Okay, let me just show you the limits. Kubectl get pods. So let's describe any of these pods. Kubectl describe pod, and then namespace is test. Okay, and go up. You see, the CPU and memory are 500, 512, 300 to 56, which is what we defined over here, I believe. 500 is memory limits. 512 and 500M, okay, are the limits. Let's see. 500 and 512, 300 and 256 was the request. 300 and 256 was the request, which is part of the test folder. But what we had inside this folder, base folder, it has a different request and limits, which it did not apply because we override the configuration with patches. So we override request and limits, we override replicas, we override config map, and so on, right? So yeah, I think we have covered a good amount. I think we've covered everything. Yeah, I think that should be good enough for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have understood Kustomize in a good way. Make sure to do the hands-on. Make sure you try it out yourself. Otherwise, it'll be lost. Okay. So I will see you soon with the next video. Thank you so much for watching.